Hello, friends. Today we pull back the curtain on a dinner that never truly ends. This is Alex at the center, mask in place, an empty chair at the far end, watching the room. The fridge hums, the cutlery clinks, and a line of polite questions drifts as if nothing is wrong. Beneath the surface, the room keeps a record of needs ignored and birthdays forgotten. You will remember this. The siren hum of the fridge, the clink of cutlery, and the low murmur of the living room folds into the kitchen as plates settle and the room settles with them. The table holds a neat row of vignettes. The glossy bowl of salad, a second loaf that keeps being passed. A string of polite questions that travel faster than the conversation ever does. At the far end, an empty chair waits like a punctuation mark, present, but not really there. Alex sits in the middle, the mask already in place. A small, practiced smile that stays when the eyes ask a question they never voice. The family moves around it. Lena's scarf of laughter brushing a corner and then slipping away. Dad's steady posture and measured voice. Mom's careful nods that pretend there's nothing under the surface worth noticing. The distance feels almost ceremonial, a tradition of kindness that never asks to be crossed. The act of eating becomes a quiet contest of calm. The fork taps, once, twice, as if counting the moments between words. Lena glances toward Alex's chair and back at her phone, as if distance could be measured by screen brightness. Dad tells a story about a coworker who learned to be early. And Mom smiles in that way that says, "We've done enough feeling for one night." The empty chair remains untouched, a soft indictment that no one meets or notices. Alex feels the room tilt toward complacency, the ache tucked behind the teeth of a forced laugh. The heaviness travels from chest to throat, where a question builds and then shoots away on the exhale. The mask, ever present, mutters a threadbare comfort. We're fine. We're okay. But the inside doesn't listen. The inside keeps an inventory. The birthdays that pass without a reminder, the needs that never show up on the calendar, the door that stays closed even when the house is warm. Alex, how was your day? Mom asks, and the words land like a polite apology for not asking yesterday. Fine, Alex says, though the word feels too small, too thin for the space it's meant to fill. The empty chair seems to tighten, as if listening for the confession that never comes. A breath too long, a horizontal pause, and then Lena's laugh leaks out again, bright and almost accusatory. Almost, as if to say, "See? We're all doing all right here." But the whisper behind the laughter is not quiet. It's visible if you look for it. The way Alex sits a breath away from the table's center, the way hands rest in the lap instead of reaching for a plate or a voice. I want to matter in this family, not just to be polite to. The air shifts. The quietness comes like a door that is opened a crack and lets a cold draft slip through. Mom's smile tightens. Dad clears his throat, the sound loud in the room. Lena flicks her eyes toward the phone, then back to Alex, as if weighing a decision that would redraw the space between them. The empty chair remains steadfast, unoccupied, but suddenly significant. A witness to what would be said, if the room could bear the truth. For a heartbeat, the table is a thin line, and beyond it is an unknown that invites or rejects with the same breath. Are you saying you need us to notice you? Dad asks, tentative, as if asking permission to step closer to a line he's been taught to keep. I need to be named, Alex replies, choosing the clearest language possible. Not somewhere in the margins of your definitions of family. I need to be asked what I need, and for you to stay in the room when I tell you. The words leave a trace, a slight tremor that wasn't there a moment earlier. The room holds, then fractures. Mom glances at the empty chair, then at Alex, searching for the script that was never allowed to exist. Dad shrugs, a move that means I'm listening, or maybe I'm not ready to listen enough to change anything. Lena's posture shifts. She looks at Alex with something like remorse, or perhaps recognition. A glint of the truth that's always been there, barely allowed to surface. The confession dries in the air, and with it, the table's careful civility. Yet something else arrives. An almost relief. A tiny opening in the previously sealed seam of the family's emotional weather. The empty chair doesn't fill, but it does look less lonely now. Because its vacancy holds a question that had been waiting to be asked aloud. Would speaking up rewrite this room? Would it invite them to cross the threshold of ease and step into the risk of honesty? The answer, for now, hangs like the last note of a chord that refuses to resolve. The question remains in the air, suspended between the clatter of cutlery and the quiet ache of longing. Will they hear me if I keep speaking? Or will they hear only the sounds we've learned to tolerate? The dinner room breathes in a soft, practiced quiet. The hum of the fridge, the clink of cutlery, a clock ticking long after the last bite. The table holds the weight of a family who knows how to look busy without saying much. An empty chair sits at the end, a pale shadow between the husband's polite smile and the sister's eyes that drift from him to the wall and back again. Alex sets down a spoon, eases his breath, and tries to name what keeps rattling inside. He opens his mouth, the words catching as if pressed behind a locked door. I need to talk about something important, he begins, voice small, almost becoming another sound in the room. Utensils, steam from the soup, the clock. Not now, his mother says, almost without looking up. The word lands like a soft thud on a heavy blanket. Dad nods, eyes fixed on the soup. Lena pushes a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture deliberate, careful, as if she's listening for a trap in the air. Alex's hand slides to the napkin in his lap, then to a folded sheet of pale notebook paper resting there like a secret. He slides the note across the table toward Lena, not toward them. The paper lands with a quiet sigh in the center, the handwriting neat and unthreatening. A few lines, a request to be heard, to be seen, to be allowed to name what hurts. Lena glances at it, then at him, a flicker of warmth fading into caution. Dad's fork pauses midair. The clink returns as if something has shifted inside the metal itself. The note's text glows briefly in the lamplight. I need to be seen. I need to be heard. I need space to say what I feel without becoming a problem. The room grows still again, as if the air itself is listening for a verdict. The sister's breath hitches. The mother's lips tighten. The father's eyes drift to the empty chair and then back to the note. Nobody picks up the thread. A silence, thick and careful, stretches. Alex watches the words settle on the table like a fragile coin. He feels the old hinge inside his chest, the one that keeps gearing toward silence, begin to creak, a tentative motion toward release. His throat tightens, and for a moment the room seems to tilt. The quiet becomes loud, the defense muffled, the fear of rupture momentarily real. He doesn't read aloud. He doesn't argue or plead. He simply sits, fingers curling around the edge of the table, holding onto the crack he's just opened with the note. The note remains there, a pale beacon in the middle of the family's careful orbit. What will happen when honesty arrives unguarded? The question hangs, unspoken but palpable, as the light shifts and the clock marks time one more quiet beat. The office breathes with soft light and the distant traffic's muted pulse. A lamp spills warm gold across the coffee-stained varnish of the desk. A clipboard waits, the edge of a diagnostic chart catching the lamp's gaze. Dr. Maya Singh sits opposite, calm as a harbor after rain, her hands folding the chart with deliberate care. "Alex," she begins, voice steady, "emotional neglect isn't a verdict on your heart. It's a pattern. How a family often responds to needs without malice, by defaulting to surface, to the polite distance that keeps the peace." She lifts the clipboard and taps the chart. On it, lines and columns breathing clinical innocence. Emotional responsiveness, boundary recognition, validation of needs. The symbol of a chart. Think of this as a map, not a magnet for blame. Her eyes meet his, and he feels the word diagnosis tilt toward something less accusatory, more practical. If you want healing, you'll need a few clear moves. First, naming needs aloud, not importing them as guilt. Second, practicing boundaries that aren't a threat, but an invitation. Third, therapy as a steady, external mirror. And a family conversation when you're ready, with structure and consent. The idea lands, and Alex tests it with a slow breath. Inside him, a stubborn thought flickers. What if naming hurts them more than it helps him learn to be seen? Yet the chart's neutral honesty invites him closer. The page glows faintly, as if it wants to be touched, not feared. "Your move," Maya says, not pushing, just offering the hinge of possibility. The plan isn't about breaking apart what's tender. It's about making the tenderness legible. We begin with a simple practice, a note of needs, prepared for a dinner table moment, then a guided talk in therapy, then a cautious family conversation. He nods, unsettled but not defeated. The room holds him like a harbor. The symbol, this quiet chart, rests on the desk, a map that promises a coastline you can reach if you choose to sail. "Are you ready to accept the diagnosis and begin healing?" Maya asks, and the question lingers, not as accusation, but as an invitation to step towards something undeniable. A choice. The room is hushed. The lamps glow amber against bare walls. A tall mirror leans in the corner, catching the spill of light and turning the space between Lena and Alex into a quiet frame. Lena sits closer to the edge of the sofa, hands loosely folded, as if she's about to say something that must be held carefully. "Lena, I've learned distance as a habit, not a wound. It began when I was small, when the room felt too big and the voices too soft to reach me. I learned to surface only in fragments, one word at a time, one doorway between us. I measured the space between us like a map, hoping if I could keep you in sight from a safe angle, you wouldn't vanish." Alex listens, the edges of his mouth tightening, not with anger, but with the ache of recognition he's kept at bay for so long. He looks at the mirror as if it might tell him who he is, beyond his own silence. "Lena, it wasn't that anyone meant to forget me. It was that we all learned to pretend that the distance wasn't there, or that it was temporary, easily filled with chatter that didn't touch the places where we felt torn apart. I watched you do the same, Alex. Listen for the sound of a door closing, count the moments before a name appeared, and then swallow the rest. Alex, I thought my silence was a shield, not a leak. If I spoke, maybe you'd see me, yes. But I worried you'd hear something you couldn't bear to hear about yourselves. So I kept the room empty of true words, hoping the loneliness would fade if I made it invisible." Lena's eyes drift to the mirror, its rim catching the lamplight as if it breathes with them. She reaches out and taps the glass, the sound a small, clear note in the quiet. "Lena, look at us there. Two figures facing outward, each pretending the other isn't watching. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows us the space we've learned to inhabit. What if the distance isn't just between us, but inside us? Between what we think needs to be said and what we're afraid to name. Alex shifts closer, almost imperceptibly, as if the distance between them has a spine he can touch now. He notes the vulnerability in Lena's voice and feels a tremor of something like trust waking up in his chest. Alex. Maybe the truth isn't a wrecking ball. Maybe it's a doorframe, simple, sturdy, through which we can step, one small word at a time. Lena. Then we stand here with the mirror between us, not as judge and judged, but as witnesses who choose to look at what's been invisible. If we can name needs without turning them into weapons, perhaps the room will stop shrinking us. A long breath passes between them, the air thick with what remains unspoken. The mirror reflects their tentative closeness, the first fragments of a shared breath. Lena. Will we see each other clearly enough to talk about what we need? The question lingers, unanswered, suspended between the soft glow of the lamp and the quiet between their breaths. Evening light pools in the kitchen, soft as a breath exhale, and the tall mirror by the door catches Alex's hands, now fidgeting with the rim of a coffee mug. Lena sits on the sofa, legs drawn to her chest, watching him with a cautious patience that feels almost ceremonial. Daniel remains upright in the armchair, arms loose, eyes flicking between Alex and Lena as if listening for a hidden cue. On the coffee table lies a folded sheet, the symbol in plain sight, stamped with a single bold line. Note about needs. Alex takes a breath they don't quite believe will steady, then steps into the gap between voice and silence. I want to talk about something that's been quiet for a long time. They say, steady but not calm. About how it feels to be unseen, even when I'm speaking. Lena crosses her arms. We're listening, she says. But the word lands with a slight tremor, as if she's testing its weight before accepting it. The defense in her posture, the quick swallow, the careful look away. These are not malice, but reflexes learned in a room where needs were never named. Alex's gaze doesn't waver. The fear is there, a living thing under the skin, but it's no longer the loudest syllable. I'm afraid of being abandoned if I'm honest, they admit, voice softer, more exact. I'm afraid my real needs will ruin what we have. They pause, letting the admission settle, then slide the note across the table as if offering a fragile compass. The note lands with a paper-thin sigh. The visible words sting and soften at once. Note about needs. I need to be seen. I need to hear you acknowledge my feelings. I need safe, predictable responses. I need boundaries that keep us connected. Lena's eyes fall to the paper, then rise, tracing the line of Alex's jaw as if the act of reading could fix something long unsettled. Daniel leans forward, not to pry, but to understand. His face a quiet map of sympathy and restraint. The note, the symbol, becomes a hinge, not a weapon. It keeps the center here on the table, where everyone can see it. Seen, Lena repeats softly, as if tasting the word for the first time. I distance because I don't know what to say. I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. She rubs her temple, a small gesture that speaks louder than any argument. I'm not trying to hurt you, she adds, almost to herself. Alex nods, not to concede, but to invite. Then hear this. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for honesty. For a space where you tell me what you're feeling, not what you think I want to hear. The tone is measured, a line drawn with care, not accusation. The room thickens with the push and pull of truth-meeting habit. The dominant movement is a choice. Alex choosing to name needs, not to blame. The defense responds with a familiar choreography. A flutter of denials, a few half-hearted assurances, a retreat to the safety of sameness. Yet somewhere in the cadence of Lena's breath, a different rhythm intrudes, the tremor of recognition. the flicker of shared pain, a tentative willingness to listen beyond the script. "Okay," Lena finally says, almost whispered. "Okay, we'll try to hear you. Tomorrow, we talk with more time, with more care." Her voice steadies, and the walls loosen just a fraction. The air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for a larger change to take root. The window light angles across the table, tracing the faint sheen on the note. The note remains, not a demand, but a signpost, an invitation to begin again, not to end. Alex's shoulders loosen. The fear has shifted, redirected into a careful, hopeful openness. The scene tightens to a single question left hanging, almost accidental in its honesty. If we listen, truly listen, will we find a way to stay connected without pretending we don't ache? The kitchen is amber lit, the evening quiet except for the faint hiss of the fridge. Alex slides a single folded page across the table. It bears only one line in neat handwriting. Note about needs. The note sits between the steaming mug and Lena's half-empty glass, a small flag planted in the center of a quiet storm. Darkanas Singh's voice slides in, not loud, just present, like a soft hinge. When a confession carries a boundary, the room shifts. The note becomes a symbol and a dare. Alex inhales, folds back the corner of the note, and speaks. "I'm choosing to be honest tonight. I need emotional availability, not advice, not fixes, just presence." The words arrive with a tremor that travels outward, through shoulders that have learned to hide their quiet ache. Lena sits on a chair across the table, her jaw tightening. "We love you, Alex. Of course we're here for you. But we're not mind readers, and we're tired of guessing." Her voice is steady, but the edges flare with defensiveness, the old ache surfacing as if it's been rehearsed for exactly this moment. Daniel leans against the counter, palms pressed to the cool surface as if to steady his own breath. "We're trying to keep the peace. You know that," he says, softer, as if coaxing the room to calmness rather than pushing the truth away. Alex meets his eyes, unflinching. "I know you want harmony. I want honesty. It's not a betrayal to say I need to feel seen. Now, not later after a fight or lapse in memory. When I share what hurts, I'm not blaming you for everything. I'm naming a need." The note glints under the lamp, a pale lighthouse of intent. Dr. Singh's voice returns, calm, clinical, a thread through the noise. "Dr. Singh, VO. Naming a wound is not a judgment. It's a boundary. Boundaries invite care when fear makes us retreat." The room tightens, the air prickling. Lena's eyes flick to the note, then back to Alex. "So what you're asking for is what, exactly? That we suddenly become the family we aren't equipped to be?" The question lands, not as accusation, but as a wound's echo. "Not drastic changes," Alex says, voice steadier, just steady listening. "I don't need you to fix me. I need you to listen while I say what I need." The words form a line on the table. The note is a hinge between old silence and new attempt at listening. Daniel shifts, hesitates, then nods. A cautious opening. "We can try to listen differently," he says, soft as a breath. "Maybe we start with what you asked for, tonight, without answers." A small breath of relief. A crease in Lena's forehead easing, barely. The tension stays, but it loosens its grip enough to let a glimmer of something else through. A shared, fragile map of where they might go next. The note remains. Not a weapon, but a compass. Alex pockets that thought and keeps their gaze steady on the family across the table. The confession has begun to move, not by conquering the room, but by inviting it to move toward a boundary that isn't a wall, but a doorway. The conversation hangs at a threshold, the turning point implied rather than declared. Will they walk through together? The air feels lighter for a heartbeat, then heavier again with all the possibilities that follow. The last image lingers. The note, a quiet beacon, and the unspoken question that still breathes between them. Can Alex keep speaking up? And will they be met with listening? Or with the old silence that often followed truth? Amber light pools across the kitchen island as Alex places the folded card on the counter. The label, Note About Needs, crisp against the glass. The room holds its breath. Lena's mug clinks, Daniel sets down the newspaper with a cautious tilt, and the familiar creak of the fridge sounds louder than usual. I've thought this through, Alex says, voice steadier than the tremor they feel. I'm choosing something hard. Therapy for all of us, and a concrete family talk tomorrow. No interruptions. Each of us speaks for as long as it takes, and we actually listen. The words land like a deliberate step onto a thin ice sheet. The fear of rejection already tugging at the ankles. But the resolve remains, a rope being thrown toward a distant shore. Lena's eyes flash with defensiveness before she softens to wary curiosity. So, we're not fixing this with a quick talk after dinner? Her tone is careful, almost measured to avoid triggering an avalanche. No quick talks, Alex replies, glancing at the note. And not silence dressed as care. The note is my attempt to name what I need, to be heard without being made to feel I'm overreacting. They unfold the card to show the neat phrase, Note About Needs, as if presenting a map to a newly discovered street. Daniel leans in, a hedge of restraint around his mouth. If we do this, I won't pretend to know what you're feeling if I don't. I'll ask questions instead of assuming. His admission is small but audible, a crack in the armor of the old pattern. The room loosens a fraction, the amber glow softening the sharp edges of their fear. Alex feels the weight shift, from a trembling, invisible effort to a cautious, gathering strength. The dominant choice has been made, to extend the hand toward healing, even if it risks more distance before it settles into trust. Tomorrow, Alex says, meeting Lena's gaze with a steadier spark. Therapy in the morning, then the family talk after. We go in with boundaries and a plan to circle back if anyone needs to pause. If it becomes too much, we pause and we come back with Dr. Singh or another support. The words feel like anchors dropped into a still water, sending ripples across the surface of the conversation. Lena takes a slow breath, eyes flicking to the note once more, then back to Alex. Okay, she whispers, not fully convinced, but not dismissive either. Daniel nods, the trace of a reluctant smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. We'll try, he says, and the hinge of the door seems to squeak, listening. The tension that threaded the air now threads through the room with a different texture. Watchful, hopeful, precarious. Alex's chest rises and falls with a measured rhythm. The fear of abandonment still nearby, but diminished enough to let a real breath through. The note lies in plain sight, a quiet talisman that promises honesty rather than defense. The scene closes on a quiet, almost reverent exchange. A fragile contract sealed with intent. Tomorrow's steps are laid out, the room's warmth lingering as a witness. The question hovers unsolved, suspended above the steam of coffee. Will they remember the plan and hold the boundaries when the day unfolds? The amber light pools on the counter, and the four of them sit with that question, listening for an answer that has yet to arrive. Amber light pools along the kitchen island, warm but thin as a thread pulled taut. A folded note about needs, rests there, its corners kissed by the glow, edges curling from a night of rereading. Alex stands with fists in the sleeves of his hoodie, shoulders tight, then eases them down as if shedding a weight. Across from him, Dan meets his gaze with that clinic-smooth calm, a practiced patience in his mouth and breath. "I want us to start therapy for everyone," Alex begins, even, but the words land heavier than they sound. "And we need a real family talk tomorrow. No interruptions. We listen." Dan nods, the corners of his mouth softening into a quiet, stubborn resolve. This isn't a punishment. It's a map. The first honest map we've seen in years. Boundaries aren't walls. They're rails guiding us back to each other. Alex lifts the note, letting a spark of courage catch in his chest as he touches the paper. "The plan isn't to fix you," he says, voice steadier now. "It's to be seen, to be heard, to have a chance to breathe." The room tilts a fraction. The kettle sighs, a mug trembles, a chair sighs its old creak. Fear feels tangible, yet possibility threads through the air. They feel the weight of the choice resting on the counter, a small lantern suddenly capable of glow. "We start therapy this week," Dan adds, his rhythm like a drumbeat that won't quit. "Then a family session after the first appointment. We agree on a rule: tell the truth with kindness. Listen before replying." Alex steadies his voice. "I may wobble, I may sound strict, but the goal is to stop feeling invisible and start belonging through boundaries and honesty." Lena's breath hitches, the room holding its breath with him. A tentative nod from her, barely there but real. The note glints a little brighter in the amber light. Can they hold the line and move toward collaboration without breaking the plan? Amber light pools across the kitchen island, a soft halo around 2 mugs and a notebook that looks almost innocent in the glare. Alex presses a palm to the counter, feeling the tremor of nerves travel up the bone of the wrist. Daniel watches, not saying much, letting the space hold the weight of what is about to change. "Tonight we set a boundary," Alex says, voice steadier than the tremor in their chest. "And we start therapy, and we talk to Lena. If we don't anchor this, the old pattern will swallow us again." Daniel nods, a calm anchor. "We're choosing to move toward healing, not away from it. I'll be the bridge when your words stumble." The confession sits between them, not yet spoken aloud. Old patterns creep along the edges of the room. The way the fridge door sighs shut, the way a joke lands flat and soft, as if nothing happened. The fear is visible in Alex's breath, in the way the shoulders tighten and then release, with a purposeful, slow exhale. Then Alex slides a folded note from the notebook toward the center of the island. A bright yellow post-it peeks out. The words, "Note about needs," scrawled across it in a careful hand. Daniel lifts it, scans the lines that follow in Alex's handwriting. "I need to be acknowledged. I need safe space to name hurt. I need you to listen without turning away. I need boundaries that are respected, even if they feel hard." "Here," Alex says, the word almost a whisper, as if saying it louder might change the living room into a battlefield. "This is what I'm trying to hold on to. This list is what I'm asking for in good faith, not as a weapon." The air tightens. The old fear leaks in. If I name my needs, I'll be blamed for breaking something beautiful. If I speak honestly, I'll be left alone. Daniel doesn't push back hard. He widens the space between them and the island, and the note becomes a small lighthouse rather than a verdict. "Choosing to say this out loud is the hard part," Daniel says. "But it's the only way to get to a place where we can talk and not panic. I'll hold the line on safety, and you hold the line on truth." He places a hand over Alex's. "We start with the therapy, and then we schedule the family conversation. We do this together." Fear flickers in Alex's eyes, but something steadier threads through the gaze. Confidence glimpsed in the quiet, a belief that the course can be altered. The word bind loosens. The note about needs becomes a tool, not a weapon. A map, not a trap. Wednesday, at the clinic, Alex says, voice gaining a touch of resolve they didn't dare earlier. And the talk with Lena, 2 weeks from now. The plan is concrete, the boundaries stated, the support clear. The kitchen, once a backdrop for quiet endurance, now hums with a tempered courage. The note rests again on the counter, a tangible symbol of the turning of tide. Daniel slides his chair closer, the two of them leaning into a future that will require steady work and unflinching honesty. The room holds them, not as perfection, but as potential. Outside, the city hum remains, but inside there's a new rhythm. Fear moving toward confidence, old silence meeting a plan, and a shared choice that might finally keep the wound from widening. Is this enough to carry them through the next talk, through the next confession, through the next boundary? The question hangs, unanswerable yet essential, in the amber glow. Amber light pooled on the kitchen island, turning the steam from the kettle into a soft halo. The note on the fridge, note about needs, glowed slightly under the glare of a single bulb. Alex stood there, hands in his pockets, breath shallow as if he could trap a storm in his chest. Daniel sat opposite him, a calm anchor, while Lena hovered in the doorway, half in shadow, arms crossed. "One sentence," Alex began, voice steadier than he felt. "We need to talk about boundaries, about therapy, about listening without turning away." He met Daniel's eyes first, then Lena's. The room held its breath. Daniel set the mug down with a soft clack. "We can pretend we're fine all we want, but we're not. If we want to stay connected, we need a plan. This is a choice to heal, not to blame." Lena stepped closer, the distance between them thinning and thickening with every inhale. "I want to hear you, Alex. I've felt left out in this house for years, but I'm listening." Alex drew a slow line in the air with his finger, recalling how silence had wrapped around him like a coat he hadn't asked for. The wound came from years of not naming needs. "I have to say mine aloud, or I disappear inside this house, again." He unfolded the crumpled note about needs and laid it on the marble surface. "This is what I need. A start date for therapy. A plan to talk to you, Lena. A rule that we stay with what's said, not what we fear." Daniel's fingers curled around the note, and then released it as if the paper might bite. "We begin with a schedule," he said. "Therapy starts in 2 weeks. After the first session, we have a family check-in. Lena, if you're open, you're part of this plan too." He met Lena's eyes with quiet insistence. "I'll be the bridge between you two and the family. But the truth has to travel through us all." Lena's mouth trembled, then steadied. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of more distance, of what I might hear. But I've seen you try to heal, Alex. I want to know what the needs are, not pretend I don't." She reached toward the note, brushing the corner as if testing a fragile thing. Alex exhaled, and the fear still burned, a stubborn ember. Yet a new light threaded through it, the will to risk belonging over the safety of silence. "If we do this, start therapy, name what we need, talk to each other with honesty, we might find a way to belong without destroying ourselves." He spoke the words aloud, the sentiment turning tangible between them. The kitchen seemed to lean in, the amber glow softening the sharp edges of their fear. The fridge reflected the scene like a mirror, and the note remained there, a small lighthouse in a storm. Daniel's gaze lingered on Alex, then shifted to Lena. "This is the choice," together or drift. The plan is simple but not easy. Start therapy, hold the conversations, and keep the note in view as a compass. Lena lowered her gaze, then met it again. "I'll try," she said, a cautious thread of resolve in her voice. "I want to belong, not just be told I'm wanted." Alex allowed himself a shallow smile, the kind that trembles at the edge of hope. "Then we begin," he whispered, loud enough for no one to doubt. "We begin with this, with us naming the needs and keeping the boundaries." The room exhaled with them, the lamp throwing long shadows that retreated to the corners. The note on the fridge waited, unassuming, a quiet beacon. The question hung in the air, unresolved and true. Will this be enough to begin healing, or will old patterns pull us back?